We have a huge Toronto Maple Leafs trade update to go over today as Elliot Friedman has come out and revealed some big information as it pertains to Brad Living's trade plans surrounding one specific target. We're going to break down exactly who it is and discuss what it means going forward as it has some Leafs fans fired up. Stay tuned for all that in this episode as the trade deadline inches closer and closer. But before we get into that, I want to announce that we are now, all of our videos are going to also be on Spotify and Apple Podcast as well. So make sure to check that out. You can see it here called Leaf Digest. Check that out. It'll be a link in the description as well to both Spotify and the link to the Apple Podcast. Well, so check that out. Everything going forward is going to be, of course, still on YouTube like usual, but the audio over there as well. But, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. Now, Darius, this is very interesting. The trade deadline is just around the corner, of course. We are now in the final stretch, the home stretch, as it pertains to actual trades happening. And a new report has dropped from Elliot Friedman revealing some pretty big information here. You can check out the podcast. But you can see this here, Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts. One of the reasons I think Toronto has been around on Luke Kunin is that they would really like to get a right shot center, especially for the penalty kill. So this is now another, and if you listen to the 30 Thoughts podcast, basically Luke Kunin's an interesting guy who the Leafs are now targeting as well. And you can add this to the list of players, but as we inch closer to the deadline, each name that a guy like Elliot Friedman or any of these reporters brings up, it means they're definitely in talks to either acquire a player like that or at least did some serious due diligence as we approach Friday.
Yeah, I think that any name that you hear right now, I think the Leafs are kicking tires on everybody right now because it is Tuesday. I mean, the deadline's Friday. So as we inch closer, they haven't made a move yet. And there's a lot of other teams that are starting to do what they want to do. You can see Chris Drury in New York. He's starting to make things happen because he knew that, this week is going to get a little bit crazy. So they haven't made a move yet. So I think they're starting to kick tires on what every price for every player is going to be because I feel like they're starting to pivot their plans a little bit because they don't want to give up on Easton Cowan and Fraser Mitten. So I think that they're probably going to go for a guy that does fit this description. Now, this is a guy that I got to I watched him live last night, right? Live in person. I saw him take two penalties, which is not great in terms of a scouting report, but I think that he definitely has some use. He's not going to wow you, right? This is not like you're acquiring a Scott Laughton or anything like that, but this is a guy who's going to be able to come into your lineup and do the things that, some of the top guys haven't been doing and the things that aren't pretty, right? He's going to get into those areas. He's going to fight for the puck on the boards. He's very underratedly physical for his size as well. Like he knocks big guys off the puck. He has a great, he can throw his body around, right? So he's been pretty good in his role. And I think that the Leafs also want, and this is something that I've been talking about on the channel, a right shot, especially on the penalty kill and perhaps at the center position, because all they have right now is left shots almost through the entire lineup, but definitely at the center position. So I think that they want a right shot there. And that's something that they're looking at. And Kunin has been pretty good. We were talking about him earlier this season, even last season, I think to a degree when he was in Nashville too, that they've had their eye on him. So this is another guy that doesn't really jump off the page at you, but somebody that I'm sure that they're probably keeping a close eye on.
Yeah, the first time we've heard about him in a very long time. I think the Leafs were linked to him earlier in the season a little bit, but now, of course, we're not even a week away. We're days away, and fans have some interesting reactions towards it. These are scenes when Brad acquires both Kunin and Luke Schenn, both the Lukes, and the Leafs make the Stanley Cup final while keeping all their good assets. Now, of course, I do think Luke Schenn is a very real possibility. I also think Kunin, because of the prices that other players are costing, whether that be Scott Laughton, I think he's a lot more realistic than some fans may think, as well as the big aspect of him, like you mentioned, being a right-handed shot, especially for the PK. Like, this makes a ton of sense. It's not going to wow any Leafs fans. And again, we're talking about multiple moves here. You would hope that the Leafs are making. If this is a part of a bigger, deal, you can see another article here, why the Leafs should trade for Sharks Luke Kunin, and that was a month ago. So there's been some rumblings for a while. Elliot Friedman comes out and reiterates that recently, a couple nights ago. You can see this here. I was watching a little bit of San Jose and Nashville on Thursday night. I look at that guy, Luke Kunin, and I was saying I could see him being a Leaf target. He's got 11 goals this year. He's a guy that scored double digits goals 5 of the last 6 years, and the 1 year he didn't, he was hurt. Friedman carried on to suggest the Maple Leafs have been interested in Luke Kunin before and cited his versatility to play all over the lineup could appeal to the Leafs. And if you're unfamiliar with his game, if you don't watch a ton of Sharks games, we obviously saw one yesterday. It is interesting because you look at his stats, 18 points in 62 games. And it is, this is not going to jump off the page at all. Like stats-wise, it's pretty rough. But you mentioned it, Darius. A, can help on the PK, but B, he would be a physical, he's not going to score a ton of goals, but he still has 11. He'll be a physical player that could help with line identity, specifically on that third or fourth line, and wherever they decide to put him. We're seeing Pontus Holmberg play the second line, so they might even throw him there depending on what happens. But most likely in that bottom six, you have some physicality and a guy who, especially over the past half decade, has consistently scored the puck at a fairly decent rate.
Yeah, I think that he could be an interesting option if they add him. The only other thing that is kind of a hiccup to me is the salary cap or how much cap space the Leafs have left compared to what Kunin makes, right? Which is like they're going to have to maybe shift some things around. They're going to have to make something work here if they want to take on his salary, because I believe he makes just over $2 million. So maybe some retained salary. So if you're going to go through the headache of retaining salary and all that, I would rather you go out and get a better player. So like I also want to add that this is pretty disappointing at this point to hear what Brad Living said, which was essentially nothing, but also at the same time saying we might not go out and get a big fish. If you're the Leafs this year, you have to go all in. You see the Bruins at times, every trade deadline, they acquire players sometimes just so other teams don't acquire players. And you have the Leafs now talking about Luke Kunin, right? Like, I think that we should be talking about acquiring a player who's actually going to make a difference because Luke Kunin there, yes, he plays physical. He brings the stuff that you need, right? Absolutely. Line identity. I've been talking about that. I think that he could help, but I don't know if he's going to make a huge difference come playoff time. I think that you actually need a difference maker, a guy like a Scott Laughton that we know would make a difference in the playoffs, even a Braden Shen. Like, I'm more reluctant to go after Braden Shen, but these guys that would actually make a difference and you would actually notice them out there. And I'm not saying that you wouldn't notice Luke Kunin, but I don't know if he brings enough to the table, especially for how much he makes. There's going to have to be retained salary there too. So don't know if I agree with this. I think that the Leafs, again, they're all in the next 2 years. I think they should probably act accordingly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, you can see this here. He's a physical player. Back in January, laid a crushing hit on Jamie Alexiak. There's some interesting things. Like cap hit is 2.75 million. As he would fit in, it would adds a higher floor and ceiling kind of to the third and fourth lines, mainly the fourth line. But again, it won't put the Leafs over the top. And I think a lot of this comes down to the price of these players, and that's why Elliot Friedman is linking the Leafs to players. I mean, he's linking them to a lot of different players because they're in talks with multiple guys, whether it be Brandon Tanev, Luke Kunin in this case. I don't hate it. I like it a little bit if it's a move that also is followed by, or maybe this is the move that follows another bigger move, because as you look at how he fits, like you can convince yourself, but at the same time, they just got Calle Yarncroke back. And if they think that he can be a useful asset, they don't have to move around salary, they don't have to give up assets. If they think he can give a little bit of what Luke Kunin could give, then maybe they consider that their deadline move as it pertains to a depth forward. They still need a center. Max Domi hasn't been cutting it. He's been very poor as of late, and the time is running out for Brad Shelby to make a move. That being said, none of the other teams are really making moves across the NHL either. We're hearing from Elliot Friedman that talks are picking up as of today, so I would assume some moves are going to go down today, tomorrow, into Thursday, and it was quiet over the weekend, so I think this is the home stretch here, and either the Leafs are going to go really big and surprise everybody with a big move, or they'll do what they did last year and get players like this around the edges.
Yeah, last year it made sense because you knew that they weren't going to win the Stanley Cup. The roster wasn't built properly. Obviously, going into the summer, Brad Living hired, Kyle Dubas out, all that stuff. So that made sense last year. But this year, they're first, right? Like, or they've been in the battle for first all year in the Atlantic. They're clearly playing really well. They're changing things around, obviously, in terms of being able to hold leads and all the like encouraging signs. So I would rather them go all in that way. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. We also just heard this morning that the Islanders now have completely pivoted their thinking as well. They're actually going to be sellers. Like, for some reason, they wanted to hang on to some of their players up until their loss yesterday. So it sounds like they've pivoted their plans a little bit and they're going to be sellers too. So they have a couple players the Leafs could be interested too. Like Brock Nelson, Pajot, those guys I think could make a difference. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there too.
Yeah, I'll keep you up to date. So make sure to hit the subscribe button and check us out on Spotify again on Leafs Digest and Apple Music as well. So thank you guys for watching. See you later.